I now invite Professor Menon, our own Professor Menon from Houston, to talk about, he's a sociologist and anthropologist, so he's going to talk about the identity that Hindus have. So Professor Menon, your question is, what is the truth about the identity that Hindus have evolved over the ages? And what are the efforts of alien groups to distort the identity of Hindus? Professor Menon?
After listening to such a brilliant presentation by our own author, Rajiv Malhotra, I don't know how much more I can contribute to expanding your vision or thinking, because by now you must be well prepared to actually take off and go into an active mode. And I'm not doing lip service. It is truly brilliant. It's a great book. Let me say just a word or two about the book. I did read the book, and while reading the book, I did come across a number of discussions and references which I happen to be familiar with already. Therefore, I was able to actually increase the pace. It's such an intimidating volume. So, it's a great contribution to our understanding of ourselves. But perhaps what is the most creditable about this piece of work is that Sri Malhotra turns into an informant, not a passive author. He serves as an informant, and he inspires the reader, be it an educator, an intellectual, a common layman. But that is the effect that I experienced when you have completed reading this book, or at least sections of it. The experience that I had is that it inspires you to ask questions. And that to me is the ultimate goal in writing a book or a well-researched volume such as Breaking India. And that's the experience I had. So congratulations to Sri Malhotra for making such a one-of-a-kind contribution, because it truly is. The author or the informant does not give us any prescriptions there. It is for us to decide. Just as my own guru, when I was growing up, Swami Chinmayanandaji, I used to attend his discourse classes when I was very young, and he used to say, I remember from one of his discourses, the pointer never touches the pointed. He shows you the direction, and then you do the journey. And that truly is the purpose of a book, and I think it has served its purpose. Now, what it led me to is a question, the fundamental question of this book is, but why? The author has described in detail, in such immense detail, a certain scenario. It is well investigated, and he has more than satisfied the conditions, criteria, or scrutiny of social scientists. That, by the way, that happens to be my background. That's my graduate training is in sociology and anthropology, study of cultures and societies. It has more than satisfied the criteria of social scientists. It is very well researched, investigated. And so here is the question, why this reality? What is the purpose? That there's been a lot of evangelical activities in India, yes, and that seems to be producing a certain effect, the fracturing of India, the disintegration of India. Okay, we started off with that statement. It's a threat to India's integrity. Yes, it is obviously, or at least it has a potential to disintegrate. Now, why do some forces want to disintegrate India? That is the question. religion, is that the ultimate? Is that the ultimate goal, to offer for free what they call salvation, or harvesting of souls, whatever those catchphrases they use? But what is the ultimate here? Or is there an ulterior motive? Well, I have to tell you, but perhaps I should introduce myself to you. Beyond my name, I'm known to some of you, and I'm not known to many of you. I'm Sharad Menon, and I do have another dubious reputation, and that is, I come from that one-of-a-kind state in the whole world, Kerala, which has got some country. If you haven't lived there, I can tell you one thing, that is the least Indian-like of all states. So, wearing a tie is not the only reason why I look quite un-Indian today, it's because I'm from Kerala. What I would like to focus on here is, yes, my own research in recent years, which has been in the area of sociology of globalization and globalizing religions. While I was conducting my research 2-3 years ago, I happened to accidentally watch an interview segment on one of Kerala channel's Asianet, about which I said better, but that's a different thing. The man who was interviewed was none other than the chair of Management Studies at the National Institute of Technology and IT in Calicut, Kerala. A brilliant intellectual. His name is Dr. Prabhakar Palleri. And while he was actually being interviewed on the terrorist attack in the Taj Mahal Hotel in Bombay, and it was in that interview, which is truly an eye-opener, he said that if we're talking about India being made a target by terrorists from Burma, he said we were totally mistaken. India has been targeted more than any other nation in the world for longer than ever. Okay. This has been going on for a very long time, even before 1947. The question then is why? Well, we have to first of all look at the demography and the potential that it holds. Where else have we found more than 350 million English-knowing, I will not say English-speaking, educated middle class? This is unprecedented in the entire history of humanity. That is the power. The Roman Empire didn't have it. The Greeks didn't have it, the Persians didn't have it, the Chinese didn't have it, and the Guptas and the Mauryaas didn't have it, but we now have it. I shouldn't say India has it. So that is something for India and Indians to consider. That it is unprecedented in the entire history of humanity to have that many, of such an immense human resource pool, part of one sovereign nation. That is unprecedented. So, why there is so much of missionary activities, why so much money is flowing into India, right, through different agencies? I think, well, actually my theory is this, that religion is only the penultimate. Religion serves as a conduit for the maintenance and the continuation of the Western economic hegemony. And the only way this can be ensured is by containing this immense pool of resource called India. That is the only way it can be done. It cannot be obviously conquered again. We have become too smart to be conquered. So the best way to do it is to play with this idea of identities. And the first question to me was, how has the identity of Hindus evolved? Well, that's a great question, and my answer to that is, if Hindus ever had an identity, that has evolved into zero. So that's what it has evolved into. And why? Simply because we are mixing apples and oranges. In the context of religion, it's apples and oranges. You have two exclusivist IDs with a non-exclusivist. I have to tell you this. Whenever I teach sociology to American students, I refer to American books. Obviously, it's one of the most religious countries in the world, so I correct them wrong. It is the least religious country in the world simply because 80% of the people are not religious. Then we have some religious numerical minorities, and why? Because religion is nothing more, nothing less than an organized polity. It is for the purpose of controlling people. Whereas someone who is born and raised in India's civilizational setting never had to worry about that. When I was born, my parents did not take me to Guruvayur temple to be baptized. There's no such rule. Right? The temple did not collect 10% from my parents. You could go there when you felt like, if you had time. Even if you never went to a temple, you will still live and die as a Hindu. So there is no control, and that's what we call freedom, isn't it? Well, it's good in a way, but the disadvantage is that in a globalized scenario, when Indians or Hindus have to compete with exclusivist bodies, then it's a losing game. Simply because this idea of true freedom that an individual enjoys, which only, if you ask me, an Indian enjoys on this planet, right? Freedom to think for oneself without being constrained societally or politically or militarily, only Indian has enjoyed, experienced it. But that remains tentative, because when you are competing for space with, or when you're forced into a competitive mode for space with exclusivist groups, then it is inevitable that at some point you run the risk of losing your own space. And for that reason, it is, for that, thank you. For that reason, it is important for so-called Hindus who take the identity to actually organize. And they can do so peacefully, non-violently, for the sake of protecting civilization. But are identities irrelevant? No, I do strongly disagree with Amartya Sen, who said that is reductionistic. It is confining oneself to a civilizational identity. No, identities are truly identities. And people do need that. That doesn't mean we are engaging in a reductionistic mode. If that was the case, then there is no need for the government of India to protect minorities, because that's an identity. Why should 2.6 crores or percent of India's population Christians have a protected identity, while we turn around and ask 80% people, identities are useless, irrelevant? No, it cannot have that. Yes, identities are very important, but that doesn't mean it would make one intolerant or reductionist. No, it is an identity that we all can cherish and be proud of. There are many things that I'd like to allude to in the context of what the author has said, but in the interest of time, I would have to cut that down. But if you could grant me just maybe, I shouldn't say 1.5 minutes, but that'd be two. Coming from the state of Kerala, I have to tell you there have been many instances of these sinister or nefarious activities, activities that are directly threatening India's integrity, and many of which could be constitutionally challenged by the religious majority, but for whatever reason it's not being done, because it's one state where you have 56% population, of Hindus and the rest somewhat equally divided, and yet with 140 constituencies, you have 73 religious minority MLAs and 67 Hindus. So that says something about the political consciousness of the people. And why political consciousness is so weak? It is simply because that grain is in every true Indian, and that is, every Indian is on one's own trajectory. The vision has always been transcendental and not lateral. And this can be politically very dangerous. And this, I think, is the reason why politically, or the political consciousness of the Hindu is not nearly as strong as that of a Christian or a Muslim, and they are not to be blamed. It's been very successful, proven to be successful. If a Hindu does not take pride, if he does not remind himself or herself of that civilizational identity, then that is not a healthy trend. So it's important for them to cultivate that consciousness. Identities are important. Sorry, Amartya Sen was dead wrong about it. Because there is a political leading to it. It's very obvious. Yes. Thank you very much.